Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories, where heartfelt tales gently remind us that even in the darkest corners, light still finds a way. How have you been lately? Has life been a little too loud, a little too heavy? If so, take a deep breath, settle in, and let me share a story with you. A story about a girl named Lena who was forgotten, unloved, yet carried the kindest heart you could imagine. This story begins in a dusty little town. The kind of place where winters are too cold, summers too dry, and gossip spreads faster than the morning sun. At the very end of a narrow alley sat a crumbling old house with a rusted tin roof and walls that held too many secrets. Inside that house lived 3 women, but only one of them was treated like she didn't belong. Her name was Lena. Ever since her father passed away from illness, Lena had become a shadow in her own home. Her stepmother, Mrs. Evelyn, was a stern, cold-hearted woman who had no love to spare. To her, Lena wasn't family, she was an obligation, a leftover from a life Evelyn never chose. Then there was Grace, Evelyn's only daughter, sweet on the outside, entitled and spoiled to the bone. She wore pretty dresses, went to school, and laughed over hot meals while Lena scrubbed floors, cooked, folded laundry, slept beneath the staircase like a forgotten broom. She was fed leftovers if she was lucky and silenced any time she dared to breathe too loudly. No one asked Lena how she was doing. No one told her they were proud. She was invisible in her own home, except when something needed cleaning. But what made things worse was that Lena was beautiful. Not the loud, showy kind of beauty, no. Lena had a quiet, effortless grace. Her skin remained soft and fair even after hours under the harsh sun. Her eyes, deep and clear, seemed to hold stories no one had ever cared to read. And when she smiled, which was rare, it felt like a crack of light slipping through an old wooden door. And that beauty? It made her stepmother's blood boil. It made Grace clench her fists when no one was looking. Because no matter how Grace dressed or how loud she laughed, people always glanced twice when Lena walked by. Even Adam, the handsome son of the town's electronics shop owner, the very boy Grace secretly admired, had a certain softness in his gaze whenever he looked at Lena. And Lena knew none of it. She wasn't trying to outshine anyone. She wasn't even trying to be noticed. She simply existed, quietly, gently, doing what she was told and asking for nothing. She never complained, never raised her voice. She just kept going, day after day, as if hoping that maybe, just maybe, one day, someone would see her for who she truly was. She lived like a flower growing between cracks in concrete, soft, quiet, but stubbornly alive. And she had no idea that life was about to change. Because sometimes the person meant to change everything for us doesn't come riding in on a white horse. Sometimes he arrives on foot, limping slightly, wearing old shoes, and carrying nothing but kindness. Love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life, in the way someone holds your gaze just a moment longer, in a soft hello, or in a single flower left beside a bucket of laundry. For Lena, love had always felt like a luxury meant for someone else. But then came Adam, not loud, not overbearing, just present. And somehow that presence began to stir something in her heart. Adam was the only son of the town's well-known electronics store owner. Unlike the boys who mocked Lena or ignored her entirely, Adam saw her. He didn't speak much, but his eyes always carried warmth. Each time Lena walked by to hang clothes near his shop, he would greet her with a smile, and then slowly the greetings became gestures. A white daisy left on the water barrel, a small paper bag of sweet tamarind candy tied neatly with twine. At first, Lena thought it was coincidence, but then Adam started talking to her, asking if she was tired, offering to carry her heavy basket when no one was watching. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt seen, and maybe, just maybe, loved. But Grace had been watching too. She had long fancied Adam, imagined herself on his arm, adored and admired. In her mind, they were meant to be. So when she saw his gaze soften for Lena, when she caught him leaving flowers for her stepsister, something snapped. One afternoon, as Adam and Lena were quietly talking by the gate, Grace stormed out, pretending to trip. She clutched her ankle dramatically, drawing Adam's attention, pulling him into a web of pity. The next day, Mrs. Evelyn forbade Lena from going anywhere near the shop. Adam tried to see her. He knocked, he waited, but Lena was locked inside, and every time he came, she was punished more. What had begun as the softest kind of love was crushed before it could bloom. Lena didn't cry. She simply placed the flowers Adam had given her into a small wooden box and tucked it under her blanket beneath the stairs, holding onto the memory of something that almost was a fleeting dream, a beautiful one. Some meetings feel like coincidence, but deep down, you know they were meant to change everything. At the far edge of the village, where wooden houses leaned against the hills and trees whispered old secrets, lived a quiet man named Jonas. He was a carpenter, not well known, not well off, just a man who worked with his hands, carving chairs and fixing doors for people who barely noticed him. He lived alone, not because he wanted to, but because life had never handed him much more than solitude. And still, Jonas hoped that maybe, one day, he'd find someone to share his meals with, someone whose laughter could echo through the silence of his little home. One ordinary afternoon, while buying nails and oil at the village shop, Jonas overheard a woman's voice behind him, sharp, loud, and full of annoyance. "I've got a daughter," said Mrs. Evelyn, sipping bitter tea with the shopkeeper. "She's pretty, quiet, and knows how to work. I'll marry her off to the first man who asks." Jonas turned slightly. "What's her name?" "Lena," she said with a dismissive shrug. "Too soft for her own good. Doesn't do much around the house. Best if someone takes her off my hands." What Jonas didn't know was that Evelyn wasn't looking out for Lena. She simply wanted to get rid of her. After the incident with Adam, Lena had become a thorn in her side and in Grace's pride. To Evelyn, Jonas was the perfect match. Poor, quiet, unremarkable. A man who lived far enough from town that Lena would disappear from everyone's view, especially Grace's. 3 days later, Jonas arrived at Evelyn's house, wearing a faded shirt and holding a small bag of handmade pastries as a token of respect. Lena, out back doing laundry, heard the voice of a stranger and felt her chest tighten with unease. She stepped out, her hands still damp, and met Jonas for the first time. He didn't look cruel. He didn't look thrilled either. He just stood there, calm, steady, with rough hands and the kind of eyes that had seen enough of life to stop asking too many questions. And Lena, in that moment, understood. Once again, fate had spoken, and no one had asked her what she wanted. There was no wedding dress, no music, no blessings, no one shed a tear, at least not for her. Lena left the house she had once called home with nothing but a small cloth bag and a few worn dresses. Grace watched from the doorway, arms crossed, her smirk wide and satisfied, as if throwing Lena away was a long-awaited victory. Mrs. Evelyn didn't even bother stepping outside. "Good riddance," she muttered, when Lena bowed one last time. Jonas walked ahead in silence. He didn't speak, didn't ask her anything. He simply led the way, his shoulders broad beneath a faded shirt. His house stood at the far edge of the village, tucked between wild grass and crooked trees. It was small, barely enough for one person, with a slanted roof, weathered wooden walls, and a door that creaked with every wind. "This is your home now," Jonas said quietly. Lena nodded, stepping inside without a word. She had expected the worst. She feared anger, demands, maybe even cruelty. But that night, Jonas laid out a woven mat near the fireplace and said, "You can sleep here. I'll take the bed." Lena blinked, surprised. It wasn't the poverty that stunned her. It was the gentleness. For the first time, someone didn't treat her like a burden, or a servant, or a problem to be solved. Outside, the wind howled, like it always did. But inside that humble little house, Lena felt something unexpected, a small flicker of warmth. Not from the fire, but from the man who asked for nothing and offered quiet dignity instead. In a small village, rumors travel faster than the wind. Only a few days had passed since Lena moved in with Jonas, yet whispers were already spreading. "Did you hear? That carpenter bought her fresh fish. I saw him get rice cakes and the expensive cooking oil. How's a poor man spending money like that?" The villagers raised their brows, exchanged glances, then let the gossip grow. But no one was more stunned than Grace. She couldn't believe it when her mother came home muttering about Jonas, the man they had pitied, mocked, dismissed, now treating Lena like someone who mattered. Grace remembered that old wooden house at the edge of the village, barely held together, forgotten by most. And now Lena, the maid, the charity case, was being fed well and smiled at. Grace felt a fire rise in her chest. That afternoon, she made up an excuse to walk past Jonas's house. Standing outside the low wooden gate, she called out with exaggerated cheer, "Lena, Mother asked me to bring something for you." But her eyes weren't searching for Lena. They scanned the yard, the burning firewood, the scent of grilled fish, and then there it was, a glimpse of Lena laughing softly with someone inside. Just one smile, fleeting, gentle, but it twisted something inside Grace. Because in her world, Lena was never meant to smile. And definitely not like that. Lena didn't know exactly when it started, but day by day, something inside her slowly began to soften. Jonas wasn't a man of many words. He didn't ask how she was doing or offer sweet compliments, but he showed care in quiet, consistent ways. Simple things, real things, things no one had ever done for her before. Each morning, the water would already be heating when she got up. When she cooked, he would silently pick the vegetables or wash the rice beside her. At every meal, he pushed the better portion toward her and only began eating once she had started. The first time she got a fever from the rain, he didn't panic. He just placed a warm cloth on her forehead, handed her a cup of lemon water, and sat nearby until she fell asleep. No scolding, no complaints, and most surprising of all, no expectation. Lena had spent her whole life feeling like a burden, an extra mouth to feed, a mistake no one wanted. But now, in this tiny wooden house at the edge of the village, someone noticed when she coughed at night. Someone placed a glass of water by her bed before she even asked. Someone told her, "Eat something before you sleep," and meant it. They were such small acts, yet they shook her to the core. One night, Lena woke to the sound of rain tapping on the roof. She shifted slightly, and in the dim light, she saw Jonas gently pulling the blanket back over her shoulders. She pretended to sleep, but her eyes filled with tears. Not because she was hurt, but because for the first time in her life, she felt valued. And yet, along with that warmth came a question. Jonas didn't seem to earn much. He wasn't known to take on many carpentry jobs. So how was he able to buy fresh fish almost every day? Why was there always rice, oil, and sometimes even pastries in their kitchen? One afternoon, as she passed by his room while sweeping, her eyes caught something unusual. A small wooden box sat on his table, beautifully carved, unlike anything she had ever seen in the village. The patterns etched into the lid looked delicate, foreign, expensive. Lena paused. Her heart beat a little faster. Who was Jonas, really? Lena was no longer the same girl who had once entered this wooden house in silence, eyes lowered, spirit fragile. Living beside Jonas had taught her how to listen to herself, to feel more, question more. And now her heart was uneasy, not from fear, but from something unspoken, something hidden, and she knew it. Jonas had never lied to her, but he had never really opened up either. The more he cared for her, with soft gestures, quiet meals, warm water at her bedside, the more she feared that everything she was beginning to trust might not be real. That afternoon, as the sun disappeared behind the treetops, Lena sat alone on the front step. Jonas had just returned from the village. He saw her sitting there, quiet, withdrawn, and didn't say anything at first. After a long moment, he joined her, his hands still dusty from work. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then whispered, "I feel like I don't really know you." Jonas exhaled, slow and steady. "I knew this day would come." He turned to her, eyes steady, voice firm. "Lena, I'm not just a poor village carpenter." Her breath caught. "I was born into a wealthy family, My parents own a chain of luxury furniture companies, but I walked away from all of it. I was tired of people seeing only my money, of hearing "I love you" with price tags hidden behind it. I wanted to know if anyone could love me when I had nothing. Lena looked away. Her chest tightened. A strange ache rose in her throat. Part of her felt relief. He hadn't lied. Not really. But another part felt betrayed. Because maybe all this time, her heart had been walking through yet another test she never asked to take. Lena left the next morning. She didn't cry, but her heart felt shattered all over again. She didn't blame Jonas for his wealthy past. What hurt was knowing she had unknowingly been put through another test. Just when she had begun to trust, to feel seen, to believe that someone had chosen her without condition. With nowhere else to go, she returned to the only place she had ever known. But as soon as she stepped through the gate, Mrs. Evelyn spotted her from across the yard and scowled. "What are you doing here? I already gave you away. Don't come back to embarrass me." From behind her, Grace appeared, holding a teacup and smirking. "Thought you'd bagged yourself a rich man, huh? What a joke." Lena didn't respond, but this time she didn't lower her head either. She stood tall, eyes calm and clear. "Thank you for throwing me out like trash. Because of that, I finally realized how much I'm worth." She turned and walked away. Not broken, but free. Lighter than she'd ever felt. That very afternoon, in the heart of the village market, everything fell silent. Jonas appeared. He walked through the crowd, straight toward Lena, and knelt down in front of her. In his hands was a velvet box, and inside, a silver ring that shimmered in the golden light. "The first time I married you, it was because someone else wanted me to. This time, I'm asking you to marry me because I choose you, because I love you." There was no hesitation. Lena nodded, tears in her eyes and a smile on her lips. The crowd erupted into applause. But Jonas wasn't done. He gently took her hand and led her away from the market. They stepped into a waiting car. Lena was confused until the car pulled up in front of a beautiful white estate nestled in the hills. Servants opened the gate. Sunlight poured into the marble-floored hallway. "Welcome home," Jonas said softly. 1 week later, they were married in the estate's grand garden. Lena wore a white dress, her hair adorned with lilies, her hand in Jonas's. The man who had loved her not when she was at her best, but when she had nothing at all. And among the guests were 2 unexpected faces. Mrs. Evelyn and Grace sat in the last row, their expressions unreadable. They had come after receiving a letter, handwritten by Lena. "I know you never loved me, but this is the happiest day of my life. And I wanted to share it even with those who never accepted me." No one had forced them to attend, but they came. Lena didn't need apologies. She had learned to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because her heart no longer carried hate. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter, flowers, and genuine love, Lena finally understood. Not everyone is born loved, but those who learn to love themselves will always find the one who chooses them back.